Dearly redheaded, we are choosing consciousness today to get through this thing called grief. Interesting word, grief. It means love, which makes for a mighty good joke, but I'm here to tell you, there's nothing else. Just joy. And if the big picture tends to bring you down, go crazy once your life goes. Woo!
Okay.
Go.
Okay, buckwheat. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
Today has started in a way I could never have fathomed.
It happens.
It happens. We were supposed to have Dr. Stein on this morning with a follow-up on dementia. He'll find us in the coming weeks. I have a story to tell. I have a cat that escaped this morning. I have two pussies, Harry and Larry. I'm a dog person, but my mom always had cats, and we had Harry and Larry as a result of her illness the last several years before she passed. Anyway, so Harry, how I got Harry's kind of interesting. A friend of mine that fosters cats had posted his profile. She said he had an IQ of 146. He liked potatoes au gratin. She's a very funny woman. And me being me, went, that's my cat. Fuck. So I sent a friend to get him because I didn't want to see the other kittens. I'm the type that can't see all the animals that need homes. It breaks me. And I said, just make sure he's mine, ours. She went over. She said, he's ours. Brought him home. And Harry had been a solo rescue, I believe, and was separated from his mother very young. So the first thing he did was start to suckle my mother's ears.
Okay.
And I had never seen a cat do that. My mother had never had a cat do that. And I'm like, is this fucking weird or is this okay? Like, am I crossing any lines? So anyway, Harry, I'm convinced, is a mystic, but may not have been a cat before because he does things like he'll jump and miss the counter. He does a lot of knucklehead things. So anyway, Harry got out this morning. I've been letting him out a little bit and really keeping a beat on him. And today he slipped under the fence. It was still dark, and I lost him. And I started to panic. I had plan A, B, C, D, E, F. And then it occurred to me, because I heard him, I bet he's frozen. So I go inside and I Google on my computer, if a cat gets out of their environment, do they freeze? And they have an absolute freeze response. They can. And in my case, I had heard him, so I knew he was close by. They can also sprint and take off and you're fucked. But in my case, I was pretty convinced Harry was close by. So I just started to treat the situation more like a human one. And went through a series of things, and sure enough, he came out of hiding about an hour later. I don't know where he was, but he came out, and the rest is history. But the whole point in telling you this story is I had every intention of talking about abuse today, my own abuse, and I think I'm going to start with a little history because it affects so many men and women about the freeze response. This is from Pete Walker's book. I also called Pete Walker yesterday, left him a nice message, asking him to consider talking to me. I know sometimes I've talked to people who have done this work and it's already behind them. They're not interested in revisiting, but I asked him to revisit dissociation with me in a modern day way because what I'm about to read is really tied, the freeze response is really tied to dissociation. And the joke I want to make is strangers on every continent should give this man a blowjob. This book is the Bible. Complex PTSD from surviving to thriving. I don't think I'd give him a blowjob. I'm retired. But anyway. I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't say that. You just snorted. You did my job.
Sorry.
Hey.
Got me there.
Hey. Well, you know. This is P. Walker. I define trauma-induced codependency as a syndrome of self-abandonment and self-abnegation. Codependency is a fear-based inability to express rights, needs, and boundaries in a relationship. It is a disorder of assertiveness characterized by a dormant fight response and a susceptibility to being exploited, abused, and or neglected. In conversations, codependents seek safety and acceptance in relationship through listening and eliciting. They invite the other to talk rather than exposing their thoughts, views, and feelings. They ask questions to keep the attention off themselves because their parents taught them that talking was dangerous and that their words were indictments that would inevitably prove them guilty of being unworthy. I can relate to a lot of this, not all of it, but this is why I'm reading it, because I know it's rampant. The implicit code of the fawn type is that it is safer to listen than to talk, to agree than to dissent, to offer care than to ask for help, to elicit the other than to express yourself, and to leave choices to the other rather to express preferences. Sadly, the closest that the unrecovered fawn type comes to getting his needs met is vicariously through helping others. Fawn types generally enhance their recovery. That part applies to something else. From there are subtypes. I am, as I think many women and men are, what's called fawn freeze. And there are fawn freeze, fawn flight, and fawn fight. Fawn freeze is the scapegoat, very dissociative subtype. It's typically the most codependently entrenched subtype. Not all scapegoats are fawn freeze, but since fawn and freeze types are both prone to extreme self-denial, many end up in a scapegoat position. This is also because there are these are the two most passive of the 4 Fs. So in addition to fight or flight, fawn freeze. They've both typically suffered the most punishment or rejection for inserting themselves in the toddler stage. When the fawn freeze is not able to escape the scapegoat role in childhood, she is then set up to be similarly victimized in adulthood. In worst-case scenarios, the fawn freezes are easily recognized by fight types who take them captive. They may turn them into doormats and subject them to domestic violence. Sometimes the fawn freeze does not even recognize that she is being abused. Other times she blames herself, as she had to do in childhood. Moreover, as we know from studying the domestic violence cycle, many narcissist abusers know when and how to shower romantic tidbits on their victims just when they are at the point of leaving. These narcissists are often the charming bullies described in the last chapter. Their infrequent tidbits have more warmth in them than anything the codependent received at home, so she quickly becomes rehooked. And just as quickly, the cycle of abuse begins again. I want to say I went from, I'm going to discuss it soon, not right now, but I went from very overt abuse to very covert abuse. And I would get those romantic tidbits from my ex when I would start to be on to him. And he wasn't going anywhere. He'd still be sitting on the couch. Just let me be very clear about that. That's also a different angle on this. I had to figure out how to get him out, which I did. I don't think I read this. It's important to note that many charming bullies also offer copious tidbits briefly in the courtship stage, but these peter out to near starvation rations once the entrapment is complete. Many fawn freeze types only make token efforts at recovery if they do not avoid it altogether. Often fawn freezes were forced to so thoroughly abandon their protective instincts that they become trapped in what psychologists call learned helplessness. Finally, there is growing evidence that a significant number of men also silently suffer domestic violence. A male client once told me that no matter how much his wife assaulted him, he couldn't stop himself from saying, "I'm sorry" to her. This only made her madder, but not as mad as when he flashbacked into saying, "I'm sorry" for saying "I'm sorry," even though his wife would slap him in the face every time he did. All right, there you go. So Harry's freeze response led me to read this freeze response before I delve into where I'm headed. I also want to say that I stopped watching programs like Dateline and Mariska Hargitay.
Was that the
Law and Order.
Law and Order, NCIS stuff, whatever the hell, yeah.
Law and Order
Sure.
Victim, special
Oh,
victim.
yeah.
I hear the music. Everybody
Yeah.
probably know. Whatever, yeah. Ironically, I was at a certain stage of healthing when I had a spiritual awakening, and I was then not prone to watch those programs. I had been attracted to those programs. I one time I was watching one based on real life, and it was about former clients, which was bizarre. So that's kind of where that interest came, and then it kind of stuck, and then I think it sort of feeded. I don't know, something inside me that I no longer had to feed once I started to do more recovery work. However, the big hypocrisy in all this is I watched the first season of Animal Kingdom. Have you watched that on Netflix?
No.
Ellen Barkin, 4 sons, highly psychopathic situation. And I was intrigued to watch it. It made me sick to my stomach because I know these situations are relevant to the way some people live their lives. It reminds me of when I watched a few years ago Shameless, and the person that recommended Shameless, although there was more of a comedic aspect to Shameless, said they liked it because it was so based in reality. And I can remember watching it going, "Ooh, that's scary." And then I watched The Unknown Caller, also out on Netflix. This I wasn't going to watch, but I'm glad I did. Because ultimately, a young girl and her boyfriend, spoiler alert, don't listen if you haven't watched it.
Is this that one that's like out now that everybody's talking about?
Yeah.
Like everywhere? Okay. Yeah, I don't get into Netflix too much.
I don't either, but
Yeah.
but you know, you have to be under a rock not to know about this particular. So anyway, there's a young woman and a young man, teenagers, that start being harassed from an unknown caller. It goes on for about 20 months. In the interim, another student is blamed for doing it in a very unfortunate way. It's the most horrible things are said, especially to the young girl. Every cruel thing, including kill yourself, whatever. It's horrible. You can imagine. So ultimately, they learn that it's her own mother doing it. And the mother claims she didn't start it, but once somebody else started, she got on the bandwagon and couldn't stop. And the police say they have no proof that is the case. The only person they show having the IP address was the mom. So that's how the mother has rationalized what she did. And the daughter has made the decision to maintain some sort of relationship with her mother. Anyway, I'm glad I watched it because it really reminded me of how I grew up, where your own family is gaslighting you. Your own family is essentially, it's not like catfishing because you know who's doing it, or whatever you want to call that. And made me very, very, very sad. And then I got a vibe last Thursday night. I got a vibe. And then Friday I woke up and I had received a letter from one of my 5 siblings. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. My issues were with my siblings growing up, not my parents. And fortunately, the fawn freeze that I read to you, I had broken because I had enough distance from my siblings and I had enough support from my parents. Even though my father died when I was 12, I had the support of my mother. So I did get this long reprieves from abuse up until through high school, then a long reprieve. Then I subsequently married somebody very similar to my family members, much more covert, where the abuse was concerned. And I suffered another round of abuse when I was 25 with a particular sibling. And then I woke up probably for good, like finally got it. I want to say around 2010, and I'll share those stories a little bit later. So, I guess I'm surprised, Brian, how many people are surprised by the unknown caller. Now, that's an extreme example, mother and daughter, but...
Well, it sounds, based on what I know, because when it comes to those shows, I'm just like, fuck it. Get me to the end. I don't want to watch it. I just want to know. But it sounds like that, like Munchausen type stuff, just in a different...
Cyber.
Instead of making them sick, you're making them sick in the head, and it's like cyber bullying, Munchausen kind of something.
Yeah, it was all, I mean, there were a lot of perspectives given. My perspective on it was the mother was abused, and she wanted to control her daughter, and the only way she could control her daughter and have the daughter need her and want her and depend on her was to do all these cruel things. Mm-hmm. So she could justify, just like a Munchausen person does, that, you know, her motives were pure. But I don't, I'm so, and it's sick, but I'm so accustomed to antisocial personality. I actually wrote a joke about myself, that I'm an antisocial social person. I'm an ass.
That's fair.
But antisocial, I mean, because I'm on the spectrum, that it is a societal thing, but I mean it to be funny because I'm on the spectrum, but I am aligned with other people in my family who are truly antisocial personalities. So I often think that we should really study where the autistic empaths come from and where narcissism comes from. I have talked about narcissism from the perspective of we're all narcissistic, we all have the potential, let's look at our shadows and examine ourselves. But what I haven't commented on before, which is what today is about, is that then there's the point of no return. And what does that look like? And how does that come through families, especially families coming from having and generationally the baby boomer component? That poor generation went through and suffered a lot. I talked about that with Melanie a few weeks ago, but what they have done to their children is just astonishing. And in my case, my siblings were 18, 17, 16, 13, and 8 years older than I am. So it wasn't my parents. To the contrary, my parents inadvertently kind of, my father was heavy-handed with my brothers. From what I've been told, I think I've admitted that I've asked about it. Like I wanted to know years ago what the fuck happened to them. Like, was it him? What happened? And I got some input there. But beyond that, other people have insinuated over the years. In one particular sibling's case, their child told me I had no idea what had happened to their parent. And I'm like, well, tell me, because maybe it'll justify the horrible things that happened to me. But that parent was either still dissociating from the abuse, or they weren't sharing the abuse with somebody like me because they wanted a justification for their behavior, because they really are too far gone. I just am surprised that we're not more savvy about covert abuse, especially because it's always in line with overt abuse too. If you've been sexually or physically abused, there's always a covert component. But people tend to get hung up on the physical sexual things, and that's fine. It's warrants it, but getting to the psychological aspect, and this is, you know me, I'm all over the place, especially today. Talking about this makes me very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. It makes me more uncomfortable not to talk about it, but giving people attention that I've cut off is very, very strange, because I have healed beyond it. But now that I know from these shows that I've watched that many people are just coming into it, I'm going to heal beyond it again. I was told something when I was in high school. I don't know if I've referenced this before, but it's important. A friend of mine was going into social work. She was dealing with a child who had been sexually abused by an older male. I don't remember the situation of the relationship, but he had done something covertly so cruel in order to abuse her. This little girl asked my friend, and I'm not going to tell you what he did. I just can't, because I don't want to. I still think about it entirely too much. But this little girl asked her, my friend, if what he had done covertly was mean. And my friend had to explain that it was. And it just was sort of, maybe one of the reasons it sticks with me so much is because it was what things like that were done to me covertly to keep me silent. Different, but similar in their effect on my brain and total dissociation. I didn't remember when I was being abused at 25, and as I said, I was newly married. I had no connection to the former abuse. I had to be told by a childhood friend for a second time when I was 54, and I'm 56, a validation for the things that I was experiencing. It manifested in me, as you all know, in PTSD. I've done a ton of work on it, and I still have CPTSD. I actually, after I received this letter from my sibling on Friday, I went into that freeze mode for about 4 days. And you sort of know it once you know it. And I don't self-sabotage like I used to, but that's still that deep instinct to self-sabotage as a result is it just does not go away. And I think I admitted in recent weeks that I found myself sedating rage, and came out of it. I had a severe dissociative episode after my mom died. I'll discuss that another time, but I then did fine for several months, and then I sedated rage for about 6 months, came out of that for a few weeks, and then had this incident happen with the letter. And I'm very pleased to say it only took me 4 days to come through it, and how quickly I was able to assess, oh, you want to sabotage and sedate rage again. We are not, as a society, addressing rage in women. It's we're very quick to call women bipolar, borderline, things that are trauma-induced often. So I'm at 25 minutes. So it's important to see the correlation that abuse plays into those labels. But I expressed things about the rage inside me to more than a couple of people. And as opposed to having them acknowledge that it was even anger, it was rage, but they preferred to tell me in 2 specific instances that I wanted to hurt myself. And both times I was like, no, I don't. But it was interesting as a woman to be told that when it was men in particular telling me that I was suicidal, and me thinking, I'm homicidal, not suicidal. And men really, really, really being uncomfortable with that. And men that should have known better. How's that for cryptic?
Thank you for listening and supporting Natural Born Redhead. If you follow the bouncing balls, please like and subscribe. If you know someone interested in sparing others grief and inciting joy, message me on Facebook or reach out via my website, Natural Born Redhead. J-Ma.